So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be continuing with the theme of going through some GCSE Maths Higher big mark questions taken from some past papers. Now, as always, there'll be a copy of the questions for you to download and have an attempt at before watching this video as we go through the answers, which I strongly recommend you do so you can see what your prior knowledge is like. Now, before we get started working through these questions, it's really important that you have a sound knowledge of the topics you can see on the screen. So in this video, I'm not going to go through each of these topics in detail. I'm just going to go through how to answer the questions. Now, again, if you're wanting more detailed explanation of these topics, then I strongly recommend you check out the lessons, which you can access by clicking on the link in the description below, which takes you to the contents page of 162 Maths, and you can simply find the lessons that go over these topics in detail. So starting with question 1, it says here are 3 sets of cards, and it says in a game a player has 2 options. Option 1 is that they pick 2 cards from set A, and option 2 is that they pick 1 card from set B and 1 card from set C. The cards are picked at random. The player wins if the total of their 2 cards is exactly 10. Which option gives you a better chance of winning? So let me just zoom in so we can actually see the question in all its entirety. So let's just zoom out a little bit. So again, with this, what we'll need to do is actually work out the probability of both of those options. So if we take option 1, so option 1 reads that we need to pick 2 cards from set A and we need to get exactly 10 in order to win. So the only way we can get exactly 10, picking cards with numbers of 1, 3, 5, 6 and 8, is basically to only have 5 and 5. So the probability of getting 5 in 5. On the first card, well, there's 3 5s out of a total of 8 cards. Then if picking the second card, there's only going to be 7 left, and there's only going to be 2 5s left. So then it's going to be 3 8s times 2 7s to work out the probability of getting a 5 and a 5, which gives me an answer of 6 over 56, which simplifies to give me 3 over 28. So that is the probability of winning with option 1. We then need to look at finding the probability of looking at option 2. So option 2, we're picking 1 card from set B and 1 card from set C. So again, you could do a sample space diagram, but again, to save a bit of time, the only way of winning is if we get 4 and a 6, or we get a 6 and a 4. And this is set 2, this or set B rather, and this is set C. So the probability of getting a 4 first in set B is going to be 1 out of 7, and the probability of getting a 6 from set C is going to be 1 out of 4, which then comes up to a total of 1 over 28. Then looking at the second option, we've got a 6 from set B, which is going to be 1 out of 7, multiplied by a 4 in set C, which is 1 out of 4. And that gives us, again, 1 over 28. Now, the word or means plus, so we add those 2 fractions together, giving us 2 over 28, which simplifies to give us 1 over 14. So here are our 2 probabilities that we then need to compare. So what we, again, if this was on a calculator or non-calculator, now again, we're trying to get a common denominator. So from this, we're comparing, I would say, for option 2, it's going to be, well, getting the common denominator, I'm going to leave it as 2 over 28. And for option 1, it's 3 over 28. So as the probability is greater for option 1, so as 3 over 28 is greater than 2 over 28, option 1 is better. And we just need to tick that box. And again, making sure you show full working out. If you want to, rather than using fractions, if you use decimals, that's absolutely fine. But as you can see, if this was on a calculator paper, we could just use our calculator, either work in fractions or decimals. But if it's on a non-calculator paper, I would opt for using fractions. And again, when comparing, make sure those denominators are the same. Moving on to our next question, so we can zoom in on this one, and so we can see it a bit more clearly on the screen. So it says for question 2, we've got a equals 65, and that's been rounded to the nearest integer, and b equals 30 to one significant figure. Work out the upper bound for 2a squared minus b squared, and you must show you're working out. Now, as we've got a subtraction, to get the biggest value, what we need to do, and we're subtracting, we need to have the biggest first number take away the smallest second number. So if I just work out the bounds for each of these two, now the nearest integer is the nearest whole number. Whole number divided by 2 is 0.5, so my upper and lower bound for 65 is going to be 64.5 to 65.5. And for b, we're rounding up to one significant figure, so it's the nearest 10. Half of 10 is 5, so we plus and subtract 5, which is going to give me 25 to 35. So to get the biggest number, or the upper bound of this calculation, I want the biggest a, so I want to use the biggest a, and I want to use the smallest b. So for this then, if I just put a little bubble around this, so for this, what I then want to work out is going to be two lots of the biggest a, which is 65.5, and square that, and I want to subtract b squared, the smallest b value, which is going to be 25, so it's going to be 25 squared. Then if I type that all into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer of 7,955.5. And there we go. And just again, it's just worth just double checking, is there any rounding needing in the answer? No, so I'm going to leave my answer like that. Moving on to question 3, it says show that x minus 5 over x minus 2 plus x plus 5 over x plus 2 simplifies to give me an expression in the form of ax squared minus b, all divided by x squared minus 4, where a and b are integers. So for this, what we need to first do is, first of all, get our common denominator. Now, common denominator, again, in this case, is going to be x minus 2, x plus 2, x minus 2, x plus 2. So in the, if I just add what I've multiplied each of the first fractions by, so for this one, I've got an original numerator of x minus 5, so the next one I've multiplied that one by is x plus 2, and for this one, the original was x plus 5, and I've now multiplied that one by x minus 2. So now that I've got a common denominator, I can now write it as a single fraction. And what I'm now going to do is expand the brackets. So I expand this one here, and again, don't know how that's going to be working with the pink. So if I expand this one here, I'm going to get x squared minus 3x minus 10 plus, and then if I expand this numerator here, I'm going to get x squared plus 3x minus 10. And then from this, we then just need to simplify. So here my 3x's cancel. So all I'm left with is 2x squared minus 20 over, and then recognizing that this is a difference of two squares. And so if I expand and simplify, that's going to give me x squared minus 4. And as you can see, it is now in this format. And again, if you want to write down what the a value is, so a equals 2 and b equals minus 20, or 20 I should say. And there you go. But again, you don't need to write this because it's not actually asked for the values of a and b. It's just saying that a and b are integers, which in my final answer it is. So this here would be how I would leave the answer. Moving on to question 4, it says, here is a sketch of y equals x squared, and it says for a, the minimum point of y equals x squared is at 0, 0 at the origin. Write down the coordinates of the minimum point of x squared plus 2. Now, in terms of graph transformations, when you're adding something to the function, you're basically shifting it up and down. So as we've got a plus 2, basically means that that's been shifted 2 squares up. So now my minimum point, which was here, is now going to be here at 2. So the answer then is going to be at 0, 2. It then says for b, the graph y equals x squared is reflected on the x-axis. Write down the equation of the graph after this transformation. Now, when you're reflecting on the y-axis, basically you need to change the sign of the y. So here we end up with y equals x squared. But because we want to write it in the form of y equals, I'm going to take the negative over to the other side. So we should end up with something like this, or you could write this and still get the full mark, or the 1 mark for this particular question. For C, it then says y equals x squared is now transformed to give y equals x plus 3 all squared. Describe fully this transformation. So here you can see we're adding something to the x, which basically means that we're shifting 3 squares. Now it's always the opposite direction, so we're going to left 3 places. Now again, the correct way of writing this will be a translation, because we are moving, and we're moving it in a translation of -3, 0. And there we go for that one. Moving on to question 5, it says the number of hedgehogs in England is expected to reduce by 4% each year. Assume there are now 1 million hedgehogs in England. Work out the expected number of hedgehogs in England after 5 years. You must show you're working out. So for this here, we want to show a reduction of 4%. So again, you always start with 100% minus the 4%, which equals 96%. And as a decimal multiplier, that equals 0.96. So again, we start with our original value, which is a million, making sure you've got the correct number of zeros. We multiply that by the decimal multiplier, which is 0.96, and we have that to the power of the number of years, which is 5. So if I type that all into my calculator, I should get an answer of 815,372.6976. Now again, we can't have 0.6976 of a hedgehog, so I here would, at this point, I would round down in terms of exact values, but I certainly would include this in the answer and then write 815,372. Now in the mark scheme, they do accept any answer because of rounding. If you've done it more of taking 4%, work it out, then 4% a reduction of that, then take away another 4%, take another away 4%. So they accept any answer between 800,000 and 820,000. So as long as your answer falls within that bracket, you get full marks, and that should be absolutely fine from there. Moving on to question 6, it says complete the table of values for y equals x squared plus 2x. Now again, I would probably say this is going to be on a non-calculated paper, so all we need to do is substitute the x values into the equation to find the respective y ordinates. So for this value here, I'm just going to do it over here. So here we've got y equals, and it's going to be -2 squared plus 2 times -2. Now -2 squared gives me +4, because the negative times the negative gives me a positive number. And I've got 2 times -2, which is going to give me -4, and that's going to equal 0. Then for the next value here, I'm substituting 1, so y equals 1 squared plus 2 lots of 1, so that equals 1 plus 2, which equals 3. And then all I then need to do is now plot this in on the graph. So if I just zoom out so I can see my table of values and the graph. So again, looking at this, I've got -3, it's at +3, so that's going to be there. -2 at 0. -1, it's at -1, which is there. At 0, it's the origin, and at 1, it's at 3. Then all I then need to do is draw a smooth curve through those coordinates. Now make sure it is a smooth curve, and that the minimum point is at 0. And again, just make sure that your graph kind of extends to -3 to 1. And again, just to be sure, I would always go to the edge of your graph. So just extend it a little bit. But again, it's a lot difficult doing on a computer, but it should be a nice, smooth, continuous curve. Then moving on to question 7, it says that Jing has £2,450. She saves some and gives the rest to her 4 brothers. The money saved to the money given to her brothers in the ratio of 2 to 5. She gives each of her 4 brothers the same amount. Does each brother receive more than £430? You must show you're working out. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to share 2,450 in the ratio of 2 to 5. So here, what we're going to do is we add the numbers in the ratio, which is 7. 2450 divided by 7 equals, and if I type that into my calculator, or again, if I need to, if it's a non-calculator, I can just do the bus stop method to work out the division, but that equals 350. So then, in terms of the money saved, which is 2 parts, so 350 equals 1 part, So equals 2 parts. So that's going to equal 2 times 350, which is 750. And then the money to the brothers is going to equal 5 parts. So that's going to be 5 times 350, which is going to give me an answer of 1,750. So then what I need to then work out then is the money to each brother is going to be 1750 divided by 4. So 4 brothers, and again, if I had to do this without a calculator, 1750, 4, carry the 1, and again that's going to be 4. No, it's not, it's going to be 3 with 3 remainder, and then we've got 4's into 30 goes 7 with a remainder of 2, and then we've got 5. So it's going to be each brother is going to get 4, 3, 7 and 50 pence. So the question's asking not how much does each brother get, is does each brother receive more than 430? So the answer then is yes. And you could just then say as 437.50 is greater than 430. Then moving on to our last question, it says the pie chart shows the information about people at a fair during 3 days, and it says there were 132 more people on Friday than there were on Thursday. Work out the number of people on Saturday. So for this, what we need to first of all work out is the angle for Saturday. So the angle for Saturday, again, as it's a pie chart and a circle, we just need to do 365 minus 80 minus 25, which again gives us an answer of 255. I don't know where the extra 2's come from, so I'll just get rid of that. And 225. Now, what we then need to do is now work out the difference between Friday and Thursday. Now, we know that the difference between those 2 days is 132. So in terms of the angle difference, that's going to be 80 minus 25, which gives me 55 degrees. So then what we then know is we know that 55 degrees equals 132 people. And what we want to know is how many people is 1 degree. So to work out 1 degree, I then divide both these numbers by 55. Oh, don't know what's happened there. So if I divide both numbers by, or both sides by 55, so 132 divided by 55 gives me an answer of 2.4. So 1 degree is 2.4 people. So I then need to work out what 255 degrees are, because that's Saturday's angle. It's going to be 255, I don't know where I keep getting 225 from, 255 times 4, 2.4, and working this out gives me an answer of 612. And there we go. Now it's really important that what examiners now are doing is making sure that the side, when you're writing equals, that one side does equal the other. So if I did write this, and let's say I just quickly change that from equals to an arrow, because 225 is not going to equal 225 times 2.4. All that is just a bit of information here, and then I'm working out my calculation. So it's really important that when you're presenting your work, try and make use of the lines and make sure that mathematically each line is correct and factual.